Welcome to programming and problem solving using Python. This is Rishikesh. In last session, we had started our functions and modules. That is our third unit in our syllabus. So in this session, we are continuing with our functions. So in last session, we saw that the function is an independent part of our program. We can use our function to perform some options repeatedly without repeating the code. And while doing so, we are also following the dry principle, that is don't repeat yourself. In this session we'll be trying to see how we can connect our function to our mainstream code so that we can use that function to pass some data that is in our mainstream code, and then we can get some output from that data. So here in print function we have used this function most of the times, so I am just giving the example of print function. So in print function, you have seen that whenever we try to call this function, we pass some data that we want to print on our screen. So the data that we pass every time while calling the print function is known as argument. The data that we pass through our functional parenthesis while calling out that function is known as arguments. This is the actual data which function will process and will produce some output for us. But while defining a function, we have to mention what kind of data this function should get. So for example, here I have created a function get some function. This function is processing some data. The data here is a iterable. So I have named that iterable as a list. Then I am iterating over that iterable and I am just printing the sum of all the even values in that iterable. So this is the function that I have created. In my case, in mainstream code, I have a iterable ARR. It is a list and it contains some values including some even and some odd values. So using this function, what I want to do, I want to print the sum of all the even values in this iterable. So what can I do? I can call my getSum function, and using this function I can pass my data as an argument to print the sum of even numbers. So what kind of data I want to process here? I want to process this ARR list. So I will just pass my ARR list through this function as an argument while calling this function, and then this calling will go to this function definition, then it will process my ARR and then it will print the sum of even elements in my ARR. But while defining a function, we need to specify what kind of data that function is going to expect while it is going to be called. So my function is expecting some iterable kind of data. So while defining my function, in definition also I want to specify that data. So how I can do that? I can use a identifier which will just identify that data for us. In this case, I'm just giving the name LST to that identifier, and the identifier that we are using while defining the function is known as parameter. So our parameter is the data inside our parenthesis of a function in function definition. The actual data that we are going to process at the time of calling the function is known as our arguments, which we are passing at the time of calling. So this is the difference between argument and the parameter. Now, very important point, whichever the data I have passed as an parameter here, I can use that data inside my function. So while defining a function, you should remember that whatever the name you are giving to this parameter, here I have given a name LST. You can give any name, that is your choice to name that identifier whichever you want, but you should use that name inside your function. You cannot use another name. So this list, that is LST, I have passed as a parameter. Then I am using that LST here for iterating over that list. So here first I am defining a variable total sum. Initially the total sum will be 0. So I am initializing its value to 0. Then I am iterating over my LST, that is the iterable passed through the parameters. Then I am checking if that value is divided by 2 or not. If it is even, that is divided by 2, and then I am just adding that value to my total sum variable, and I am updating my total sum variable after every iteration. And at the end, when we come out of the loop, then I'm just printing my total sum. So this is how this function will work. And while calling this function, I am passing the main data through this function. So what is the main data here? Main data is ARR. Now ARR will be passed through getSum function, and it will be processed like we are processing our ELST. So ELST is just a identifier and ARR is our actual data. So the actual data is known as argument, and the data that we use as an identifier while defining a function in function definition is known as parameter. So these are two important things that I want to discuss in this session. Let us save this program and try to run so that we can see our output. So here in this ARR, the sum of even numbers is 2, 4, 6 and 6, 12. So we should get 12 as an output. So we are getting 12 as a output. So our program is running very fine. So that's it for this session. Thank you.